We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Previously on Becoming Human.
Come on, Mr. Bigby, don't be so hard on yourself. I mean, regrets have nothing to do with age. We all have them. You know, things we didn't do, things we should have done.
You know what might be really interesting tonight? If we all shared our regrets with everybody else. It'll help Mr. Bickley, and we'll all get to know each other a lot better.
Well, what I most regret in life has to do with a man named Tony.
There is something. It's been haunting me for years. I was 15.
That's a good one. Who's next?
Oh, Mark, it's just that it's very personal. I'd really rather tell you when we're alone.
Ooh, our sense of intimacy grows.
And then I was alone. And I haven't felt like dancing since. It's not right to close off a part of you, is it?
When we come back from the commercial, there's another nighttime exterior of the house.
My regret is that women only want me for my body. Want to trade regrets? It's not funny, Mr. Bickley. It's a curse I've had to live with. Girls only see me as a plaything. I have a mind, too, you know.
I don't believe this.
I mean, when I'm on a date, all I hear is, Remo, make a muscle. Remo, make a muscle. You know how cheap this makes me feel? Hey, look, at heart, I'm an old-fashioned guy, but I don't know, these days, all women want to do is grope, grope, grope. I'm tired of being a phone number passed around at the beauty parlor. You understand, don't you, Mr. McConnell? I want a relationship.
I'm sorry, Remo, but he's already married.
I can't help it God built me this way. You know how it feels when a woman looks at my shirt and then whispers to her girlfriend, I wonder if they're real?
Tragic.
I don't know. I just pray that somewhere there's some woman sensitive enough to, I don't know, see beyond this classic shell of a man. I want her to discover the real Remo, to reach out for me. I want to be talked to. I want to be held.
Well, I'm sure there's someone out there somewhere.
I just hope she's built.
This regret is obviously played for laughs. We have Remo playing with the cliches about being treated like a sex object and saying things that were associated with women feeling objectified. And then, of course, the punchline is that he wants a woman who's really built to be the one to hold him and care about him. And the others are very amused by this. It's unclear how much self-awareness Remo has, and obviously Jeannie, as his sister, is the most skeptical. We get sort of a mention of Kathy, and of course, as usual, it's not explained where Kathy is. But it's clear that Mork does not ship Remo. Mr. Bickley asks who hasn't spilled their guts yet. And I guess Mork has said enough about regrets that they're not counting him and they don't expect him to go, which is probably for the best. Jeannie thinks it's just Mr. McConnell and Mindy. Mindy asks her dad to go next, and she rests her head on his knee, kind of like a little girl. She's turning to her daddy, wanting him to help her through this awkwardness. Mork encourages Pops to tell them about the time he was sold into bold slavery. So this is another reference to white slavery, as prostitution was sometimes referred to, I would say early 1900s. All of them laugh because it's another bald joke.
Well, there is something I've lived with for quite some time. Even Mindy doesn't know about it.
Really? What is it?
It happened November 24th, 1950, in Korea. It was late and we were on patrol. I remember trudging through the frozen mud in a miserable 5 below. Suddenly the sky lit up with incoming shells and we all scattered into the woods. I'd never seen trees broken off at the top before. Or men either. Well, the shelling stopped and I was surrounded by an eerie silence. Just then, I heard the frozen mud crunch behind me. I whipped around and I saw somebody charge at me with a fixed bayonet. Before he could get to me, I raised my rifle and I shot him. And he flew back into a shell hole. Dead. Mindy, I killed him, man.
But, Dad, you had to. He would have killed you.
He was the enemy, Uncle Fred.
When he's 3 feet away, he's another human being. The look on his face as his life left him. There are nights when I still see it. I just wish I didn't have to pull that trigger.
If you didn't, Fred, you wouldn't be here with us.
Yeah. And you never would have had Mindy.
Mork, you're right.
Yeah. Now I'd probably be living with Mr. Bickley.
Then I'd really have a regret to share with you all.
So there's definitely a tonal shift. This is the most serious of the regrets. We find out that Fred actually killed a man. That may change how you see Fred, although everybody emphasizes that it was during wartime. If Fred hadn't killed this other soldier, he would himself have been killed. I think that there's been a mention or two about Fred being in the army. Not as big a motif with his character as it is with Howard Cunningham on Happy Days or Frank DeFazio on Laverne and Shirley, but in the background. And as I said, if Fred is 50 or 51, that fits with him being in Korea fairly early on, November 24th of 1950. He tells this to all of them, but it's also clear that this is a part of himself he's never shared with his daughter, and it's filmed so that she is listening to him and being sympathetic. She's sitting close to him, and he says, "Mindy, I killed a man." Probably something that he's thought about telling her. One day he's going to have to tell his child what happened during the war. But the others, as I said, react, and we have Nelson saying he was the enemy Uncle Fred, and that's a very rare interaction between Nelson and Fred. We have the dramatic music emphasizing what happened. Music is used a lot in this episode to help with the tonal shifts. Mr. Bickley calls him by his first name and said that Fred wouldn't be there with them. And so this is Mr. Bickley not being cynical, not joking. He is acknowledging their friendship, although putting in terms of all of them. And for Mork, the most important thing is that Fred lived to become Mindy's father. Fred realizes that that's really important to him as well. Then we end on a joke about Mork living with Mr. Bickley, which would be a whole other sitcom. Although most people in the room don't know this, it would have been as if Mork's egg landed and Mr. Bickley took him in, although first season Mr. Bickley definitely would not have. Mr. Bickley jokes about then that would really be a regret to share. So we go from this very dark, serious thing of Fred killing during wartime and ending on a Mork is annoying but adorable kind of joke. Glinda sighs and says some of these regrets are heavy, and I'm not sure which she's including. Obviously Fred's, probably her own, maybe Jeannie's. I don't think she means Remo's is heavy. Jeannie says, but they make her feel so much closer to all of them tonight, and it feels really very good. Jeannie doesn't regret telling them that she had an affair. She admires them for opening up. She and Nelson smile at each other. He seriously says he never knew exposing himself was such a warm experience. Some of the others laugh, Mindy quite a bit, but Nelson doesn't seem to get what he's just implied. Mr. Bickley says it's been an interesting party, but it's past his bedtime. Remo stands and says, wait a minute, Mindy hasn't told them her regret. He helps her to her feet. They all encourage her, except Mork protests that she has no regrets. He holds her hand and says she's had a perfect life, thanks to him and her Lady Remington, and that's a reference to a particular shaver marketed at women. And I don't know if that's a reference to a specific commercial, because then she laughs and playfully puts her arm around his shoulders. So maybe that was a catchphrase, thanks to me and her Lady Remington, but it didn't ring a bell to me. Nelson says, come on, Mindy. She stutters that she can't. There are a few loud knocks at the door. She says the door, as if they could have missed the knocking. Mork says, phew, regrettus interruptus. Skirting the censor a little bit because of coitus interruptus. The others laugh. Mork opens the door to Exeter. Mindy says, oh no, and puts her face in both her hands. She's already stressed out about whether her friends are going to pressure her into revealing her regrets, and then somebody she doesn't want to see even under the best of circumstances shows up. The audience applauds a lot for Exeter. Exeter says, Mork, is that you? But This time, Mork says, "It's me, Exidor." So Exidor says, "No, I'm Exidor, you're Mork." So I appreciated that they were mixing that up a bit. Glinda crosses the room to kneel next to the couch. She asks, "Who is that?" She saw Exidor come into Da Vinci's restaurant on the gossip episode, so she shouldn't be reacting like this is somebody she's never seen before. So that was the error I talked about. And I guess she technically didn't meet him then? Remo answers that that's Exidor, the town loon. Exidor yells, "I resent that, Curly," referring to Remo's hair. He drops the suitcase he's been carrying onto the floor. He says he doesn't live in town. He cheerfully says, "I'm a valley guy." As I mentioned, there have been one or two earlier references to Valley Girls. I would think all of Boulder is in the valley, right? I mean, it's surrounded by mountains. Who knows what valley he's thinking of? He tells Mork he brings bad news. It's not going to be easy. He has to sit down. Mork moves the suitcase and shuts the front door as Exidor perches on the kitchen counter, resting his feet on one of the dining room chairs. Exidor says, "I just got back from the doctor." Mork asks, "Which doctor?" Exidor says, "Exactly." And Robin Williams looks like he's going to laugh. This is a very old joke, but the way that Robert Donner delivers it seems to get to him a little. Exidor says that the doctor told him in Swahili he's only got 41 years to live. Here's his note describing my condition. He hands Mork a rock.
Your mama.
This is borderline racist because of the African stereotypes, and then it ends with an African-American stereotype with "yo mama." I'll kind of allow it. It wasn't as offensive as it could be. Your mileage may vary. Fred comes over and sits on one of the bar stools. He says, "For goodness sake, Exidor, 41 years is a long time." Exidor leans towards him and says, "Easy for you to say, cue ball." So another reference to Fred being bald. "You've got your health. I'm about to punch out," like a time clock. So I thought it was interesting that Fred is trying to reason with Exidor, even though he should know better by this point. Ironically, Comrade Janice lived another 41 years, dying in 2022, while Robert Donner, who was a few years younger, died in 2006. Mork helps Exidor down to the floor. Exidor says that's why he plans to spend his last waning moments here in this house with his dearest friends. And I don't think he means everybody in the room. It's interesting that, as far as I can tell, he is not traveling around with about a dozen followers like he did in his last couple episodes. As near as I can tell, he didn't even bring the burro. Mindy sarcastically says, "Imagine our excitement." Exidor says he'll just lie down unobtrusively. Glinda gets up from the floor, like she wants to get away from Exidor. He tells all of you vital people, just go on with whatever you are doing. Mork sits in the cushion that Glinda just vacated, as Exidor lies across Remo, Jeannie, and Nelson on the couch. His boots are on the couch arm, and his head is in Nelson's lap, as Nelson still tries to hold on to his ice cream. Remo calmly looks across the room and says, "Okay, Mindy, what are your regrets?" Jeannie looks at Remo like he's crazy. Mindy laughs, but face palms, while Glinda, who's in the other easy chair, looks amused. Jeannie says out of the side of her mouth, "Remo, there's a man in a robe lying on us." Exidor sits up a little and says he couldn't help overhearing. What's this garbage about regrets? It's not that he overheard Jeannie talking about him lying across her and the other two, but he heard Remo ask Mindy about her regrets. Mork kneels and says they're all telling each other the things that they regret the most. Exidor sits up and says he's got one, besides the fact that Whitey here has got bony knees, and of course Nelson is not only blonde but very tall and thin. Exidor stands and tells Mork that he's been feeling really down the dumps since his wife left him. And oh my gosh, talk about something that could have been a whole episode in itself. It had been a while since I'd seen this episode. I forgot that there is sort of Ambrosia closure. Unbelievable. And of course, we don't know when that happened. Maybe he's been down the dumps for months. It's kind of hard to tell with him. Mork says Exidor must have been awful shocked when she bit through the leash and got away. I don't know if Mork thinks Exidor married his burro, which is possible, or if Exidor had Ambrosia on a leash. Georgia Engel, I hope you're safe wherever you are. Exidor shakes his head and then squats next to Mork. He says he was feeling really low there for a while.
I even let my appearance go. And then, as fate would have it, I became attached to another woman. Deeply attached. And my regret is that I haven't told her my feelings.
Oh, well then by all means go and tell her now.
Should I, Mork? Should I run to her and risk rejection? Not to mention mono.
Yes. Yes. Go to her. Let your heart fly like a moth into a blowtorch.
I love you, my sweet. I want to have your baby.
Oh, no way, not me.
I see. Goodbye, Whitey. Shorty, Curly. You too, Perky. You know, Mork, you're the only one here with a normal name.
So Mindy continues to be sarcastic, at least until she finds out who Exodore has fallen in love with. Exodore, we've seen in the past, is afraid of intimacy. Here it is expressed that he's afraid of getting mono. In a sense, we go full circle with Mork playing evangelist, like in the first Exodore episode. So I like that. And we get more of Mork and Maz with a moth and blowtorch line. And we find out that Exodore has had this love, whatever that means to him, for Mindy for however long. And she is horrified by it. And he was willing to risk rejection. So, at least he doesn't press it. I'll give him that. He didn't force the issue. And yes, he wants to have her baby. So another line that will be very ironic when we get into season 4. He not only has named Nelson Whitey and Remo Curly, but he calls Jeannie Shorty. It looks like Gina Hecht was 5'3", so yeah, she was probably the shortest adult regular cast member. And of course, he calls Mindy Perky. Bickley hates to admit it, but this has been the best 50-year-old birthday party he's ever had. And of course, it's his first, and maybe last. Glenda beams at him, and I guess she is crediting herself with the success of this birthday, because it was her idea for them to spill their guts at each other. Mr. Bickley says they've all helped him learn something here tonight. Age has nothing to do with regrets, which is what Mindy's point was earlier. He can do all those things he's always wanted to do. It's like, yeah, read the Bible, go to Niagara Falls, go to the Grand Canyon. These are not impossible things. And he'll start tomorrow, and he asks, who the hell is stopping me? And it's implied that he was stopping himself all these years. The others offer incoherent words of encouragement. He widens his eyes and stumbles a little. He says, but tonight I need my rest. They all laugh, and Mork holds his hand to steady him. Mr. Bickley says he's got 50 years of living, starting tomorrow. Fred gets to his feet and says, come on, Frankie. So that was a nice callback to the episode where we found out that Mr. Bickley's name is Frank or Franklin. He says, let's see if we can beat these kids to the door, offering solidarity and friendship that they are close in age. And he puts his arm on Mr. Bickley's shoulder as they start to head out. So that was a nice bit of closure to their friendship. Nelson and Remo stand as Nelson says that the guest of honor is leaving and it doesn't take the roof to fall on Nelson's head. Jeannie gets up and follows them. As Glenda takes Nelson's arm, Nelson says he knows the party's over. Nelson is aware that he's not that bright, but even he realizes this, and we get that nice little Glelson touch. Whatever happened at the drive-in, they are still a couple. Jeannie is sorry she didn't get to hear Mindy's regret. Mindy says, oh, it'll keep. Jeannie and Mork clasp both hands as Jeannie says thank you. The others are getting their coats and jackets. Glenda also says thank you. Mindy thanks them all for coming. Remo is the last to leave, and he says it's real nice to have friends. And so I thought that was nice. This series, to some degree, and certainly this episode, is about the importance of friendship, and Remo realizes that. Though he learned his sister was once the other woman, he feels pretty good about what he found out about people that night. Mindy says, yeah. Mork does the yo armpit thing as Remo exits. Mindy laughs and looks out the window like she sees them starting to get into their cars. Or maybe she's just looking at the weather, I don't know. Now that they're alone, Mork eagerly asks Mindy her regret. She laughs and says she has to sit down. She sits on the attic stairs and then sighs.
My regret is that my mother had to die before she got a chance to meet you. See, I couldn't say that in front of everybody because then I'd have to explain that I wanted her to know everything about you and...
Well, in fact, I came from another planet and everything.
Yeah. And that you're as close to me as she was. And that you're the most important thing in my life.
Deeply moved.
Oh, my mom would have liked you, Mark. I just know it.
I would have liked her, too.
Yeah.
I know what I would have said to her, too.
You do?
Sure. Hello, Mrs. McConnell. Nanu. That's my way of saying shalom. Yes. Oh, no, ma'am. I don't live around here. I live here. Oh, with Mindy, yes, ma'am. Oh, we're very close. No, not that close. I don't even know what that is. Well, you see, ma'am, I'm a creature from another planet, you know. You know, like Alien. Except that I'm cuter and I don't skitter across the floor like that. Oh, yes, ma'am, I'm single. You know, if it wasn't for Mindy taking in strays, I would never have a place to be. I just want to thank you for bringing her into this world. Do I love her? Well, I want to give her everything I have and spend the rest of my life with her. Is that love? Oh. You know, it's kind of funny that I had to come millions of miles to find something deep inside of me. I wonder if she feels the same way. Yeah, I guess you're right. I should ask her myself. Thank you, ma'am. Oh, thank you very much. I like you, too. That's what I would have said to your mom.
I had a feeling you're trying to say something to me, too. Mark, is my mother really here?
She told me to give you something. I love you, Mindy.
I love you, too, Mork.
These few minutes are the culmination of the episode and the season, and in some ways of the series, although yes, there's more season to go, it still gets to me. I was sobbing a couple times, but these happy sobs. It was just so many emotions stirred up. But I'll try and break things down a little bit. We've had this recurring motif of Mindy's grief about her mother and how Mork has helped her to deal with that, and so we get this callback here. And we had the episode where Mindy's mother's spirit entered Mork as he sat in her rocking chair, and there was just this nice little scene. This is different. It is Mork meeting the parents, the other parent. Of course, he met Fred quite some time ago. Again, how much of it is real? Did the door just close on its own and he's just acting this out? And Mindy has that look on her face like she's trying to process all this and what's real and what's not. But this is a way for Mork to talk about his feelings for Mindy and to imagine what her apparently very likable and understanding mother would say to him and he would say to her. And there's humor in it, but it's very gentle humor. And he starts out calling her Mrs. McConnell, so he's kind of formal. Doesn't call her moms to go with pops. He tells her that he and Mindy are very close, but not that close. He doesn't even know what that is. There's still an innocence to Mork. It's implied that the closeness is not physical closeness. You can take that and the rest of the scene in different ways. It's interesting that he tells Mrs. McConnell that he's single because apparently he wants her to know that he is available to be with Mindy. And maybe considering that Jeannie dated a married man, which judging from the little we saw of her mother would just be utterly shocking. Maybe it's to emphasize that as well. Mrs. McConnell asks if Mork loves Mindy, and he has had to learn what love is, and he's still not entirely sure, but he defines it as wanting to be with her, to spend the rest of his life with her. I mean, that is a huge, huge commitment. Mrs. McConnell seems to regard that as love. At least Mork sees it as love. He wonders if Mindy feels the same way. On the other side, Mindy has this regret. She obviously misses her mother for many reasons, but one of them is that her mother didn't get to meet this special person in her life. Part of what makes him special is that he's an alien, and I really liked Robin Williams' delivery on the line about him coming from another planet and everything. There's a certain maturity in that Mork moment that we don't always get to see. I've been in a relationship where my partner's mother died a couple of years before we started seeing each other, and I really wished I'd had a chance to meet her and hoped that she would have liked me. And even though that relationship has changed and we're not a couple anymore, that was very relatable to me as an adult and something I wouldn't have got out of this watching it at 13. Mindy is watching this, not sure if her mother is really there, but knowing that with Mork, it's sort of possible. So she's processing that, and she's also hearing this confession of love, witnessing it, watching it as an audience, like we're watching it, and not knowing why Mork has chosen this time and this way to tell her that he loves her, and also not knowing what he means by love, because he comes from a place that is very anti-emotion, and she has taught him about all these emotions, and their relationship has developed and grown, but she doesn't know exactly what he's saying, and she even says that she's not sure how he means that. Mork refers to Mindy taking in strays, and of course that's something that's more true of him. He's really the only stray that she's welcomed in. There have been all these people and creatures that he's dragged into the apartment, and she's had to make room for them because she cares about Mork, but really he's the only one that she wanted to stay. And Mork says that he traveled millions of miles to find something deep inside him, and that's a really moving line. He's gone across the universe in order to discover a part of himself, and that part of himself is Mindy and his love for her. And when Mindy realizes that maybe her mother was there because the door closes, Mork gives her a motherly kiss on the forehead. There's a thread of almost parent-child, and this can flip, and sometimes Mindy is like Mork's mom, and he's like, not so much her dad, more like her mom, in the sense of caring about each other and being very tender. We don't see it every episode, but it is an aspect of their love, similar but obviously different than parental love. We have them saying, I love you. There aren't many couples or potential couples on sitcoms where you actually get that kind of ship culmination. And maybe it's not 100% romantic, but it definitely can be taken that way. And it's very powerful. They say that. They admit that. And it's not that they've never said that they love each other, but the way it's done here. After having this evening with their friends and learning things about their friends, being grateful for friendship, there's also just this special bond that only they have. And like I said, if Fred had stuck around, maybe Mindy would have said, you know, I really wish Mom had got to meet Mork like you did. But it would have felt different. But I mean, she certainly could have. But she chose this to be something that she shares only with Mork. And she decided this early on in the evening. She likes her friends. I guess she loves them. But it's not even close. She wanted to give this as a gift to Mork. So that, in a sense, is an offering of love in itself. And then the kiss on the lips. We freeze frame. There's no tag. Just on DVD. Just go straight to the credits. And probably on the original airing. I don't think they would have snuck a commercial in there, but maybe. And that's just where we hover in space. This could have been the last episode of the series. Although it wouldn't have resolved everything, it would have been a really nice place to leave everybody. We could imagine what would happen next. We get, if not closure, at least kind of tying a bow on the various characters that we saw and leaving Mork and Mindy connected like this. I don't remember exactly how I felt when I was 13, but I'm sure I was very, very happy. I'm sure I was very moved. I think when I knew that they were getting a fourth season, because of course you don't always know what show's going to be renewed, especially at that time, the late 70s and early 80s. There were so many cancellations and schedule madness, as we've talked about before. I think I assumed that it would go from there, that after that kind of confession, they would be a couple. This was one of the things I shipped super hard at 13. I will talk about this when we get there. I was in the studio audience for the fourth season opener, so I have many points of view on that. But certainly after this, taking that with me into the studio audience probably shaped my reaction then and now. Season 4 will do what it's gonna do. Getting back to this episode specifically, I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. And I knew starting this season that this was gonna have to be my favorite, unless there was something that surprised me. And certainly there were some episodes that were better than I remembered. In some ways, this is my favorite episode of the series, but I can't really go above a 3.5. I need to articulate that as best I can, even though I adore the last few minutes of this scene in this episode. On its own, that's like a 10 out of 4. This is another episode that uses basically the whole regular cast. They are incorporated much better than they are in the gossip episode. I heard it through the Mork Fine. You've got this large cast that is used well and plays off of each other, and you have the little cameos from Amy and Lola and Exodore, and those are incorporated well. And I do like seeing other sides to the characters, but it's not on a level with the Mork and Mindy stuff. The Mork and Mindy stuff is the meat of the episode. I mean, it's nice that we get, for instance, Glenda dancing with Mork and showing some vulnerability. But I don't love it. I don't adore every freaking moment of this. I wouldn't say it's filler, but there's like some transitional stuff. When I started taking notes after watching it all the way through, I thought, is this just going to be me writing the word clip in the margin in really big letters and then a bunch of notes? Like, am I just going to show you 22 minutes of footage? But there's some stuff I can sum up. I wasn't dazzled every moment, so that's why I can't go to a 4. I probably never will. I'm somewhat of a perfectionist. I tend not to give out the A+. Certainly, it is a strong episode. It doesn't have any serious flaws. Like I said, there's that kind of racist moment and, a few things that don't quite work, but otherwise, very strong. Certainly 3.5 is nothing to be ashamed of. I also rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports and promotes the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. This may seem going over the top, but I'm going with a 3.5, and I don't even give out 3s that much for this category. This season, just hitting a 2.5 was pretty impressive because a lot of the season is not about their ship. And I wouldn't say that their ship is as central as it is in the Mindy and Mork episode, which was the previous one, but in a sense, that last scene aside, this is about Mork and Mindy playing host and hostess together and supporting each other. Even though he dances with another woman, it's not romantic. He's protective of her. Them gathering with their friends and her father is part of their life together. It's not the most important part, but it is part of it. The scene with just the two of them talking about what's important to them and talking about love and all the different kinds of love, discovering things about each other and themselves. I honestly think that this is the shippiest episode so far. Season 4, I'm not sure exactly how things are going to go because I remember at the time being disappointed that it wasn't as shippy as I hoped. This just pretty much ends on their love. They are suspended in time kissing. In a way, the whole episode leads to that. It doesn't feel tacked on because the whole thing is everybody's pressuring her to talk about her regrets, and her regret is related to him. I think it's also she would regret not having him in her life and not being close to her. So I guess it's not regretting. The title, of course, is one of those rare titles that doesn't have Mork or Mindy's name in it. It is mostly about regrets, but it's also about reflections and people thinking things over. What did they learn about others and themselves by talking about their regrets? Reflections also in the sense of mirroring things. There's that element. I very, very strongly recommend watching this episode. I just don't see how you could avoid it. It's got just about everything in it, and everyone, but not Cora. In a sense, the season ends here, but next time I will give you a bonus episode, and then after that I will talk about season 3 as a whole, including my favorite episodes, and so yes, we will be revisiting this and maybe looking at it a little more in terms of the larger season. But for now, 3.5 eggs, 3.5 hearts. This is Paula Schaffner with Regrets and Reflections. Thank you for listening.
If you guys are really us, what number are we thinking of?
69, dudes!
And now, it's coming in. I'm about to reach final curtain. All of my friends, let me make it real clear. Staking my claim of which I'm trying to be certain. I've lived, I've loved, I've lost, and I've traveled. The Lord only knows how many, 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 many highways. Oh, so much more than this. I did it my way. Yeah. Regrets, I've had a few, but about regrets, I just won't mention. I did exactly what I thought I should do. Stood right there and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along.